Every time I go to a yarn shop or a yarn festival, or this often happens when I go on vacation, I find a new yarn store, I always end up leaving with that one very special skein of yarn. Often I get home and I have no idea what to do with it. Or it feels so beautiful and special that I just can't commit to any one specific project for that skein because I'm afraid that I will find a better project for it in the future. I know that I am not the only knitter with this problem. So today I am featuring 15 patterns that will be perfect for that beautiful single skein of fingering weight yarn that you maybe picked up as a souvenir skein from vacation or picked up from a new yarn shop that you visited. These are all patterns that I myself would personally knit. We've got shawl patterns, we've got hats, we've got mitts and mittens. Lots of great patterns that I think you'll really like. And maybe you'll be like me and you will have a whole basket of single skein fingering weight yarn and you'll find multiple patterns that you will want to knit from this list. So if this sounds like content that you would really enjoy, welcome to A Lovely Yarn podcast. My name is Amber and I'm really excited to bring to you today this list of 15 projects for that beautiful skein of fingering weight yarn. But before I get started into the deep content of this podcast episode, I just want to mention what I'm wearing because I will get asked if I don't mention that. This is the No Frills Pullover by Petite Knit, and I knit this with fingering weight held double with mohair, silk mohair, and the fingering weight was yarn that I bought off of Cozy Posy Yarn Co. probably 8 or 9 years ago. It is called Birch. I don't even know if she still has it. And then I held it double with a soft pink silk mohair that I believe is the Drops brand. And it is a very just classic, simple raglan pullover. Another thing I'd like to mention is I'm going to do this episode just a little bit different than how I normally do my pattern roundups. I usually get into fairly deep detail when I'm talking about patterns. I didn't want to do that for this one. I'm going to provide a Ravelry link to the bundle as well as individual links to each pattern. So if you hear me talking and see a picture of something that you think, oh, I'd really love to knit that, you can click through and get all the details such as needle size and more information on the construction. This is really more of an inspirational video. For all of these projects, you're only going to need 100 grams of a fingering weight yarn. And for some of the projects, you're not even gonna need a whole 100 gram skein. So I thought that we would start with shawls and scarves because honestly, this is probably the type of project that I'm going to be more likely to knit when it comes to using up a skein of beautiful fingering weight yarn. Let's summon spring with this first shawl. This is called the Spring Thaw Shawlette, and this is a pattern by Loop Designs. This one is just such an easy, relaxing knit. It's mostly garter stitch, and it's got a little bit of drop stitch detail, so it keeps things interesting without being overcomplicated. It's also one of those pieces that would be really easy to wear, as you can probably see from these pictures. It just has such a nice shape. You can drape it over your shoulders, you can wrap it around your neck, which is probably how I would do it. It would give a little bit of extra warmth. And I think this would work perfectly with any type of yarn. So a tonal, a variegated, a speckled, whatever you have, I think that this would work beautifully with any of those types. The next shawl that I found is called the Alpine Aster Shawlette. And this is a pattern by Brianna Arlene. This shawlette is just so stunning. It has this beautiful textured lace stitch that is mixed in with some cables. And this pattern motif is inspired by alpine asters, which are those little bright purple flowers that you see in the Rockies in the early summer. So this shawlette is knit sideways, which makes it a bit more interesting to work on. It's my favorite shawl type. I love crescent shaped shawls. I just find that they work so nicely as far as how I like to wear my shawls, which is wrapped around and tied at the front. I also love that this pattern is both written in charted form as well as like the instructions are written out in case you're not, comfortable with one or the other. You have both options. The next scarf is called the Dewdrops scarf. and this is a pattern by Lisa Hannes. This scarf is just so incredibly pretty. I was drawn to the lines of it immediately. It has a really lacy, airy pattern, and it creates these clean graphic lines. It's just perfect if you want something lightweight that really shows off a special skein of yarn. So it is also knit sideways from tip to tip, which makes it a little more fun to work on, in my opinion. I feel like when you're, it just feels like a side-to-side shawl knits up so much faster. This pattern is written both charted and row by row. So again, if you feel more comfortable with one way of knitting than the other, then you have both options with this pattern. The Rathland Island Scarf by Brenda Brayfield is next up on my list. This is such a thoughtful pattern. It's a shallow crescent shawl that's knit sideways, and it has these really pretty slip stitch lines with little decorative puffs, and that is what actually attracted me to this pattern. I just think it has so much character. So the body is all knits and slip stitches. You have no purling for those of you who do not enjoy purling. And it's very approachable, but it still keeps things interesting. It's also a very flexible pattern. It comes with several variations, so depending on your mood or who you're knitting it for, you can make the classic version. There's a version that is made with beads. There's a smaller version you can make that is more like a tied kerchief. And there's also a version that is a cowl. I've had this next pattern on my radar since Amy Christopher's released it. I'm a big Amy Christopher's fan. I have knit multiple projects of hers, and I really want to knit this next scarf. It is called the Ghost Flowers scarf. It just looks so simple, yet those little flowers on it are just calling my name. This is a fingering weight option, but there is some flexibility in this particular pattern. It can be worked as a scarf, a shawl, a kerchief, even a bandana, and you can really make it whatever size you want. So it's worked from the bottom up, which I kind of love for a single skein because you can just knit until you're happy or until your yarn runs out, whichever happens first. So there's really no guessing or playing yarn chicken with this one. The eyelet pattern gives it a really light, delicate feel. And because you can adjust the gauge and needle size, it really works with almost any yarn you'll have on hand. So I wanted to include a brioche scarf project on this episode because I really actually love brioche. I've not knitted a ton of brioche, but I do have a brioche shawl that I wear quite often, and I remember the process of knitting it was very fun. So this next shawl is called the Flowerette, and it is a pattern by Leslie Ann Robinson. I think she's also known as Knit Graffiti. She has so many great brioche patterns. Now this is such a sweet little shawlette. It's a symmetrical triangle. It is knit side to side, and it uses one color brioche. So this gives it so much more texture, and you don't even need an extra color. So you're getting some nice variation, and you're just doing it with one color. I think that this would actually be a really great pattern for using up variegated yarn because that brioche stitch would do a really great job of breaking up any pulling that you would get in a variegated skein. So what I really love is that it comes in two sizes, so you can adjust it based on the yardage you have, and then you can still end up with something that feels very intentional and very wearable. If brioche feels intimidating, this is actually a brioche beginner friendly knitting pattern. One color brioche knit flat is about as approachable as brioche knitting gets. So this would be a really good start for your first brioche scarf. I have one last shawl left to talk about. It is called the Mill Hollow, and this is a pattern by Emily Clausen. This scarf is really just very lovely. It's inspired by a camping spot in Utah. There's a simple lace pattern that runs down the center, and then there's garter stitch on either side, so it feels very balanced and peaceful. It's knit from point to point. It has gradual increases and decreases, so it's more of a relaxing, intuitive knit. It's kind of, I think, shaped like the Sophie shawl, which so many knitters love and rave about, which I personally have also knitted and love that pattern. So I think it will wear similar to that because it is knitted similar to that. It is a true one-skein project. It was designed to be so. I would say not to pick a super busy or variegated yarn for this project because you do want to let the cables in the center panel shine, but a tonal or a maybe even a speckled, I think would just be beautiful for this pattern. Okay, so I realize shawls and scarves aren't everyone's thing. So I wanted to include mitts and mittens because I think this is great. If you don't want to commit to a whole 100-gram skein, you could even get several pairs, or at least 2 pairs out of a 100-gram skein of fingering weight yarn. And so I have some mitt and mitten patterns to talk about today. The first pattern is the Orchard Stroll mitts, and this is a pattern by Woolen Cottage. These feel just so classic and cozy. They've got the traditional cables with garter stitch. I think they would make a really great gift pattern, which is one of the reasons I love mitts for single skeins, because you could actually complete fairly quick completed project without using a ton of yarn and without committing a lot of your time. They're knit in the round. They have a gusseted thumb. The cables are simple and the instructions really walk you through it. I also like that the pattern gives you some sizing options and some cuff options so you can customize depending on who you're knitting these for. The next mitts are the kindling mitts, and this pattern is written by Jacques Studio, and I think these are just very classic and a very practical pair of mitts that would be worn often in my home. They're also convertible mitts, which means that you knit them a little bit longer so that you can fold the top down or flip it up and give your fingers a little bit of extra warmth. And I just actually knit a pair of convertible mitts, not this pattern, but a different pattern for my daughter, and she has worn them and loves that she has the flexibility of knitting or of flipping that down and keeping her fingertips a little bit more warm than if she has it folded back. They're mostly just simple ribbing, which makes them a really straightforward knit. I also love how flexible the pattern is. It has multiple sizes, and you can actually use this pattern with fingering weight or DK weight yarn. So it's easy to adapt with, you know, whatever you have on hand. And I just think this is one of those patterns that would be genuinely useful and classic looking, and something that I would probably knit once and then want to make more of. This next pair of mitt patterns is written by Alicia Plumer, and they are called the Waystone Mitts Light version. She must have a heavier weight version as well. These are such a cool design. They're actually completely reversible, and the thumb gusset is just really clean and geometric looking. So you can actually wear these mitts on either hand. There's not like a right and a left. They're interchangeable on your hands as well. If you've ever wanted to try brioche but felt a little nervous about it, this is honestly such a good entry point. So there are just a couple of brioche movements. There's no increases, there's no decreases, and it's worked in the round. So I think it would probably be pretty manageable for a first-time brioche knitter. They just feel thoughtful and special, and they also feel like a pair of mitts that would be very wearable. And also, I also think that they would be a great unisex option, this and the kindling mitts. So, you know, I think I could see myself wearing these mitts as well as my husband. I had to include this next pair of mittens. They are so beautiful. They are called the Welcome to My Garden mittens, and they are a pattern by Laura Menendez. Oh my gosh, they're just absolutely stunning. They were inspired by the winter bulbs in the designer's garden, and I just think that makes it so special. And the fact that I am so excited for all of my bulbs to come up this spring, it just makes these even more special to me. So you can actually make these patterns as a fingerless mitten, or you can make them a full mitten. And I love that because you can choose what works best for you or for the person that you're knitting these for. They're worked in the round, but what makes this pattern really approachable is that it actually includes videos for the techniques, including the embroidery, because you will do some embroidering on these when the knitting is all finished. So that's great that she includes that, because I know not all of us are comfortable with embroidery. I love embroidering on knits. I like embroidery anyway, and so these little mittens just feel so special, and like they would be a fun project without getting overwhelmed with the thought of embroidering like a whole sweater. Now we're gonna move into some hat patterns, as well as one pattern for a bandana. The first one is called the New Moon Hat, and this is a free pattern by Pearl Soho. This is just such a good classic option because it's literally just a classic ribbed hat. I love patterns like this for single skeins because they're familiar, they're reliable, they fit pretty much everyone's head because of the ribbing. You know, you don't have to get so caught up on what is their head circumference when you're knitting these for someone and you don't know. You just don't need to think too hard, and you can just enjoy the knitting process, and you'll end up with something that you actually wear. It would also be a really great gift for someone. So this pattern comes in a really wide range of sizes. It starts down at baby and it goes the whole way up to adult. So it's a really great choice if you're knitting for gifts or you want a go-to hat pattern that you can use again and again. Okay, this next hat is beautiful, and I have never seen a hat like this before. It is called the Spur hat, and this is a pattern by Hiromi Nagasawa. The texture of this hat is just so unique. So it's knit in the fingering weight yarn, but because of the folded brim and the way the ribbing and the brioche style stitches work together, it ends up being a really warm and really squishy hat, but it doesn't feel overly heavy. What's really fun about this pattern and what I really found interesting was how the rib changes as you work toward the crown and you get into the decreases. So by the time you get to the top, you have this really interesting design of lines. But this just feels like a really great option if you want a hat that's a little bit different but still very wearable, and I think it would also make a really nice gift knit as well. I almost didn't include this next pattern because it is so well known, and I feel like I've never personally knit it, but I've knit something very similar to it, and I feel like a lot of knitters have knitted this, but I don't want to assume that everyone knows about this pattern, so I wanted to mention it because it's a great pattern for a single skein of fingering weight yarn, and that is the Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. And this pattern is literally written to use up a skein of yarn. If you've never made one, it's actually a double layered beanie. It has a really clean and simple shape, and it's completely swatchless, which is great for those of us who don't really care to make swatches. Not that I really swatch for hats, to be completely honest. It's just a very meditative knit. You're basically casting on the one side, you're increasing, then you get to a certain point and you're just knitting a tube, basically like a sock. And then once you get to a certain point, you're going to start your decreases, and then you close up your crown, and then you tuck one end into the other. And because of the way it is made, it is great for like playing with yarn, doing stripes, doing color blocking, or a lot of people just use a single skein of yarn and call it done. So it's one of those patterns that is very popular, but I think it's very popular for good reason. Okay, I wanted to end with something a little bit different, and this is called the Holly bandana, and this is a pattern by Susan Mueller. Now, we'll say that all the project details on Ravelry are in German, I believe. So I had to do a little bit of translating to find the details out on this, but the pattern is in English and German both. This bandana is just so sweet. It is a small, playful little triangular piece. It's got some lace pattern. I think it works beautifully as both a headscarf, or if you wanted to wear it like a kerchief, it would be perfect for using up one skein of stash. And the pattern actually includes two different sizes. So one size is perfect for wearing on your head as like a bandana on your head, and then there's a slightly larger version that works really nicely as a neck scarf. It's knit from the top down to the point, and it's finished off with an I-cord edge all the way around, which gives it a really nice clean polish. I love I-cord edging. So those are some of my favorite single skein fingering weight knitting projects. All projects that I would truly knit myself. I hope you found something inspiring. Again, all of the details will be listed down below as far as pattern names, and then you can click through those and go to the Ravelry page to find out the price, the needle size, all the other little details that I didn't get into today in this episode. I'm also very curious, do you have any patterns or projects that you always go to when you buy a single skein of yarn, fingering weight yarn? I would love to know, so leave that down in the comments below. And if you enjoy cozy knitting chats like this one, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. I post fairly regularly. I've been on a weekly upload schedule, so that's been really fun. I love to talk about my knitting. And thank you so much for watching. Happy knitting, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.